How can you increase stomach acid if you think you have low stomach acid? I think one of the best places to start is actually to tackle some of the things that are currently reducing your stomach acid. And there are two very important things that come to my mind immediately. The first is actually cortisol. When we have higher levels of cortisol, this will actually reduce our stomach acid. Interestingly, this could actually lead to kind of a self-perpetuating cycle. And this is because when we have reduced stomach acid, we're more likely at risk for any sort of bacterial infection inside of our stomach. And this bacterial infection will actually increase our cortisol levels. And this kind of leads down a slippery slope. So I think the first thing to do is try and mitigate high cortisol in the first place. And this really is only going to be a problem if cortisol is elevated all day long. Specifically, if cortisol is elevated before a meal. So one great strategy is to go on a walk or simply just take a few breaths before a meal to kind of downregulate and relax. Typically, the more emphasis we put on our exhales, the more downregulation we can induce. And another thing for people who work out or are athletes is maybe not shoving in a protein shake and cereal right after a workout to try and fit the anabolic window. We see that the idea of the anabolic window isn't necessarily as small as we think. And as long as we hit our total macronutrient and protein requirement throughout the week, there really is no difference in results. So instead of trying to eat immediately after or even during a workout, simply give yourself a little bit of time to downregulate after a high-intensity workout. The next thing that comes to my mind is that a lot of times, again, when we have low stomach acid, we're more at risk to bacterial overgrowth or infection. So typically we'll have a large amount of bacteria inside of our colon or large intestine, and we'll have little to no bacteria inside of our small intestine and stomach. However, one of the functions of stomach acid is to remove all the bacteria on our food, and to help us actually digest and break down the food. And when neither of these things occur due to low stomach acid, the bacteria on our food could actually begin to colonize our stomach, and this undigested food could perpetuate the cycle of bacteria growing inside of our small intestine. And this is referred to as small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And when we have bacteria inside of our small intestine, which is the site of a lot of our nutrient absorption, these bacteria compete for the absorption of nutrients, specifically nutrients required for producing stomach acid in the first place, specifically zinc. And once again, this kind of perpetuates the cycle of not having enough stomach acid because we don't even have the micronutrients required to make it. Additionally, these bacteria can actually produce what are called alkaline substances. The reason they call it stomach acid is because it's very acidic and has a low pH. And an alkaline substance has a high pH and not much acidity. And the alkaline substances produced by these bacteria can lower the acidity of our stomach. And you can kind of see how this cycle kind of develops. First, we have low stomach acid, which allows for the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And then these bacteria make it even more difficult to increase our stomach acid. And this is actually a scenario where I may suggest reducing fiber content in the diet, and trying something such as a low FODMAP diet, which you could find on the internet. And this is just going to reduce the amount of foods that you eat that will feed these gut bacteria and allow them to continue to live, and continue to contribute to low stomach acid. Interestingly, these bacteria also feed on iron. So if you take an iron supplement, you may want to acutely stop the iron supplementation so you're not continuing to feed these bacteria. And now sometimes the cycle gets so bad that the only step is to take hydrochloric acid, which is a supplemental form that will increase stomach acid. However, I do really hate using supplements, so there are some things that I could suggest. Trying to find a rapidly digestible zinc that may be digested early enough so that the bacteria aren't digesting it could help increase your zinc status and increase your stomach acid. The other thing would be to try and lower your cortisol with some of the breathing and mindfulness practices I mentioned. But you may also want to get checked for any sort of bacterial infection, which could be unconsciously raising your cortisol. Finally, one supplement that I would recommend that's really easy to find is vitamin C. Supplemental vitamin C is called ascorbic acid. And because of its acidity, taking alongside a meal, it could increase acidity and increase digestion. And I found it to be extremely helpful to help digest a meal containing a large amount of protein. But one recommendation I would get is to actually be checked for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Blindly taking supplements could oftentimes lead to unplanned outcomes. So I would want to know what is actually causing the low stomach acid in the first place so we can fix the root cause. With that being said, I hope you found this interesting, and if I missed anything, leave it in the comments below.